when I take a serious issue. We got to get to the bottom of this.
Of course, I agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's meet today's specialists. He is a former teacher with 20 years experience, a frequent guest on the Fox News channel, and a radio talk show host for WPHT 1210 Philadelphia, but he specializes in educating liberals in the city of brotherly love. Dom Giordano is here. And he's a writer for The Hill, a former political director for President George W. Bush, and he's the chairman of the American Conservative Union. But he specializes in learning to be a farmer. Right. Matt Schlapp is here. All right, Matt, I'm going to go to you on this.
Sure.
Much like with the Comey firing, the reasons behind the Comey firing, what concerns me here is the shift. Yesterday, McMaster was saying this is false, and then today he's saying the premise is false, which is actually quite a different thing.
I think the thing with Trump is every time there are these controversies and there's this turbulence, and I will admit to you there's a lot of turbulence, and he does things in a way we haven't seen presidents do. But if you get to the heart of it, the heart of this was President Trump believes that Russia is an important ally in this sense. Both want to destroy ISIS, and he wants to make sure that they get a leg up in that fight. Just by the way, as President Obama before him tried to do the same thing in the fight on ISIS. So I think where we all get confused is we say, well, they shouldn't have had those photos get out. What was the protocol in this one? It was a little sloppy. But in the end, I think the policy is correct. And it reminds everybody what is the Trump policy. And the Trump policy is let's at least try to get along with Russia if we can. Let's make an attempt at it. And let's do everything we can to just kill and defeat ISIS.
I think it's a little more than sloppy if there's a switch in the message like that. I always question things when there's a switch in the message. You disagree with that?
I do disagree with Kat. I think the shot of the day to me is the screenshot of the celebrating, high-fiving Washington Post newsroom.
Right.
If this is so important, classified material, sober, serious, and Trump is not, how are these people, the nation's esteemed journalists, high-fiving each other and tweeting that out? Because their viral count, the quick count of this went past the Access Hollywood count. That, to me, says where we are. I think Trump has to tighten up. I think everybody that I know that knows him thinks there has to be more tightness. But I think this was a blunder rather than making it he's treasonous. We've actually heard that today.
And, you know, one of the things that the left, the media, a good friend of mine, Joe Scarborough and Mika this morning, Joe looked like he was going to cry. I mean, I love you, Joe, but it wasn't that important of a deal. They were pointing out that, well, if this leak, you know, if Trump turned over some information with an ally that the ally discovered, that means the ally was no longer going to share information to fight terror or fight ISIS with us. And it turns out that I think the Washington Post and, no, I'm sorry, the New York Times and CNN have reported that the information came from an Israeli source. Now, Ron Dermer, the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador, says, quote, Israel has full confidence in our intelligence sharing relationship with the United States and looks forward to deepening that relationship in the years ahead under President Trump. So if this is much to do about nothing, there's nothing that is.
So let's talk about Israel, Eric. I'm really glad you brought that up. So that statement, while I appreciate the spirit of it, doesn't really tell us anything, truthfully, because that's what you have to say in this moment in time as a diplomat. So we don't know. They're not confirming or denying whether or not they were the source. But here's to Don.
Can I just say that the feeling among the left and the liberal media was that because the source, whoever the source was going to be, might cut off a diplomatic relationship,
right,
or at least a terror-fighting sharing information.
It could chill
avenue that was there, and Israel, who clearly is the source, says that's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen, and that's important, and I think we need to focus on that point. So to your point and to Dom's point, there's no doubt that there are people in this country that are just salivating at every moment. Every day they wake up and it's a fresh opportunity to impeach Donald J. Trump. And I actually think that absolutely has to stop, because then that undermines the important conversation that we're having at this table about our ally in Israel, about what might chill the effect of this information sharing, which is so important because certainly their ability to provide us information is critical to them and to us. But we can't even have that conversation effectively because we're too busy worrying about every single little mouthful of opportunity to impeach President
And I
Trump.
would say we can't have the conversation about is this competent, how bad it is, does he need more schooling? That's a legitimate conversation. I've been critical on occasion, and I think everybody has. But when you go out there and treason's thrown out and Mika Brzezinski and all this stuff, then what you do is the Trump base, people that call me, they get riled up. They don't want to hear any of this.
It's a blanket protection around that issue, and then we bypass the nuts and bolts of the conversation.
All right. Well, this afternoon, Press Secretary Sean Spicer gave an off-camera briefing to reporters highlighting the growing security threat from leakers.
What has occurred today or over the last little while in terms of these leaks is frankly dangerous. This is clearly a pattern of people releasing sensitive information to further what appears to be someone's agenda.
Ooh, do you notice what happened there?
Yeah.
He released the statement, a verbal, statement, rather than going to the full briefing, which is what they were threatening to do a couple of days ago. So maybe this is a new, way they're going to start releasing information. But Spice is right, and this is really, Matt touched on it in the first comment. The leaks are really at the heart of the issue.
I agree that those are important. Of course, they're important.
It's the biggest issue here, not whether or not Donald Trump said, yeah, there's a laptop computer that ISIS wants to blow up. There's a battery that looks like a battery but will blow up. That's not the issue. The issue is that our intel is being leaked. Our conversations with diplomats are being leaked to the press.
We're missing
that is awful.
We're missing the heart of each one of these little mini controversies that comes up. Same thing with Comey. Should he be gone as FBI director? Every Democrat in the Senate would have said, get rid of him, right? But when they can make politics out of it, they make politics out of it. Let's look at the White House. Some sloppiness around the creation of this meeting. They do have to tighten that up. The idea that they didn't know who had what devices taking photos, that means they could be listening in on conversation. We had enough of that with Russia. We don't need any more of that. And the next piece of this is on the personnel side, they got to fill these slots. They've just got to fill them. We've got to have better staff work done. I know the Democrats in the Senate are intransigent. They want to stop everyone. But part of this is on the White House, too. You've got to fill these slots. The people I know who are in that administration doing great work, love the president, they're just flat out exhausted.
Well, I agree that the leaks are a problem. And I agree also, Ebony, with you when you're saying that a lot of people will jump on anything that they see as something to take down Donald Trump. I'm just so confused if really this story is he did say certain things, but it's okay to say them and the premise is wrong. Why not come out with that first instead of saying this is all false and then coming out the next day and saying the premise is false? He did, some of the stuff is true, but it was okay for him to say it. It was for a common goal.
So I think ultimately a lot of people kind of question the legality. That there's this big question. Again, everyone who's waiting with bated breath for impeachment as the ultimate goal is everything Donald Trump does, is it illegal? So we know here it's not illegal because ultimately the president enjoys wide authority on the ability to declassify something as he sees fit. So let's take that off the table. But then the question of judgment, to your concern, I think that's a legitimate question. Is it smart to be sharing information our allies are giving us, even if, to Matt's point, it's in the interest of furthering an alliance with Russia on the issue of ISIS? It's just something to consider, because if Eric and I are friends, right, and we talk and we exchange information, even if it's something that I wouldn't necessarily mind you finding out, Kat, it might do something to my trustworthiness of Eric if he tells you without my knowledge or consent.
Well, I'll take that analogy one step further. I think in the best interest of everyone, I think that's smart to do. Even if I've been told information that I'm not supposed to tell anyone, you know what, guys, I just have to let you know. We wanted music in the studio before we started. We're going to push for music. You guys cool with it? Yeah. Well, hey, Bowling, you weren't supposed to say anything about that. I'm using an example that's happening right now.
Yes, and we applaud.
That's not really very sensitive.
The world, no, but it's in the interest of safety. Number one, the world has a common enemy with ISIS. That should override everything. One final thought.
No.
You notice what happened up until today? The Russian collusion issue with Donald Trump was the biggest story in mainstream media. Where'd that go today?
Well, there's a new target.
Oh, they got a new one. They got a new reason to hate on Trump.
All right. Well, all right. The president's enemies are fanning all kinds of outrageous speculation around the legality of what he reportedly told those Russian diplomats. Fox's Judge Andrew Napolitano, however, is taking the wind out of their sails.
He may have broken rules about the manner of declassifying information, but that's not a crime. Under the law, the president can declassify anything. So he can take a top secret. This top secret is called SAP, Select Access Procedure. It's the top of the top secret. He can declassify that. There may be political fallout for him declassifying it, as we'll find out as the day, I think, today progresses. But there's no legal charge.
Yeah. Yes, he's talking about U.S. Code 18 U.S. 798 on that one. Yeah, it's just the way the law is written. And so there are a lot of people now having this equation conversation around what Trump allegedly has done here with what Hillary Clinton allegedly could have done or around that. The difference, of course, is factually you can't really make those comparisons because she didn't enjoy that same authority because she wasn't the president, and Donald Trump is uniquely positioned.
What it gets at, though, is just the hypocrisy here that people were defending Hillary to the hilt and saying she should be president, even though she's this compromising with Trump. This is treason.
Can I throw something else out there? Matt may disagree with me on this one. John McCain, did you hear what he did? You know, he came up very, very strongly against Trump. Facts were surrounding.
It's so typical. When you first get up in the morning and you read the paper and you say, "Oh my God, this horrible thing has happened," my heart usually stops at these moments. I'm like, okay, you know, what have they done? And then you start reading about it. Then you talk to people in the know, and you're like, wait a minute. Is that all this is?
But a senior senator with as much experience in you know,
maybe a little too senior.
That's
listen, I'll agree with that. I'm on record as saying that, but I think he really needed to find out what was going on, especially the guy who spent a lot of time in Syria, kind of backing up maybe the wrong.
I think everybody on all sides should not be afraid, no matter who is saying what on what side in any situations, to wait a little bit before reacting.
You have to
be mindful.
That's not cable news, okay? You know,
but
we got to get out there.
You really should, because people listen to these things. You can speculate, but there's a difference between speculating and saying I think this and saying I know this for a fact.
And you know what? For those who really are concerned, Kat, with the takedown of Donald Trump for whatever reasons, political, what have you, this is actually not beneficial for them. What you need to do is sit back and wait. And if indeed the president does something that is worthy of, impeachment, then when you make that argument. But to make this argument at every little misstep, every single thing that comes out and speculate ad nauseum, it's not helpful.
Yeah. Boy, Karloff. All right. Next up, the Democratic freakout goes completely off the.
Hypocrisy runs deep in the alt-left. Case in point, let's first listen to the liberal posse delivering their predictable, over-the-top, jacked-up rhetoric surrounding the Trump-Russian ambassador meeting leaks.
This president is a loose cannon. The president of the United States cannot just do or say or speak whatever the hell he wants. That's just irresponsible.
People are going to be alarmed, astonished, appalled by the recklessness and carelessness, at best, of this kind of talk with the Russians.
The White House seems to be a catastrophe. It's crazy. It's mishigas, a good Yiddishism. It's mishigas. It's just confusing craziness.
This is the most serious accusation ever made against the sitting president relating to national security.
Ever.
If it's true.
Breaches like this will get Americans killed eventually. There's no better way to put it.
Okay, but now let's refresh the memories of these liberals. In fact, it was their own presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton, who severely mishandled classified information for years. Or was the fake news media back then? Charles Krauthammer wouldn't let it slide last night.
It's just pure opportunism and a reflex reaction, and particularly since their candidate for the presidency had been spilling classified information, some of the highest level, for a year and a half, and the Democrats pretended it either wasn't a problem or that it should be ignored. It's rather unseemly.
Now, Dom, you touched on that in the A block. Hillary Clinton was the one who was, feasibly leaking classified information for her.
And sometimes I wonder,
mishandling, I should say.
Yeah. If Democrats want to win with Trump. I think what it is, they can't figure out how to beat him. He's unpredictable, unconventional. So they throw up their hands and think just saying anything is going to... And Blumenthal is made for Trump to troll, the senator from Connecticut. Every time that he's out there, Trump just eats this up. There'll be a tweet about this guy.
You're talking about Blumenthal. I assume, Matt, Don might be talking about when Senator Blumenthal kind of forgot his own military records.
Yes, that's right. You know, I served a year in ROTC. I can't really make that into anything bigger. It wouldn't be appropriate. But this is just so typical of them, which is they lose track of their own weaknesses, and they've got their own weaknesses on classified information. By the way, we only have one president. He can declassify anything he wants at any time.
And that's what you said, Ebony, right? That's
exactly what the statute, that good old statutory law comes in handy. Here's the problem. For the Democrats in this moment, I understand there's still a lot of upsettedness, shock and awe, what have you, around the November elections. That's really what this is still about for many of them. Here's the issue. Now is the time to get in front of it. This montage, Eric, that we just played to open this block, that is the same narrative they were anticipating on winning that election with. This shock and awe and outrage of how much of a disaster Donald Trump is. It didn't work in November. My advice to them as a party would say, okay, now is the time to, because there are some missteps, some sloppiness, at least as Matt called it, from this White House. Use that as an opportunity. Get in front of issues on get an economic message, get in front of national security, get in front of, I don't know, criminal justice reform, and actually put together a cohesive message that people can go to the polls and vote for, not just being so afraid and intimidated by Donald Trump.
And Kat, isn't it true that Trump garnered a huge percentage of his vote by people who said, you know, I'm tired of business as usual in Washington, D.C., so they voted for him? Meanwhile, it seems like the media can't accept what he is. He's different. He's not a typical. You can't get the laser on that target.
You most certainly cannot. And I think if you're a Democrat and you're concerned about security, but only if it's a threat that's potentially been committed by a Republican, you're not really concerned about national security. You're concerned about taking down Republicans, and that's just the truth. You have to be concerned about it on all sides, but that applies to both sides, Republicans too, and Democrats. But people have had enough of these politics for the sake of politics, which is exactly why they voted for Donald Trump. And if they continue this, they're saying, oh, isn't this so shocking? Isn't this so shocking? Well, the guy was shocking when he was running, very shocking, and he still won. So you're going to have to find some other talking point, any other talking point.
Or maybe a message.
Right. You know, you keep your finger on the pulse. I mean, especially with CPAC and whatnot. A lot of these same people who are trashing Trump are saying, oh, look, this is really great for Democrats in 2018. But they were so completely off base going into 2016 election. They have any argument in this at all?
Well, look, I think the Democrats are in a rough spot here because if you really look at it, Eric, there's no policy disagreements. They all wanted to get rid of Comey. They all want to defeat ISIS. They're the original idea of, oh, we don't have to fear the Soviets or the Russians. We should make nice and we should all get along. All these policy disagreements, they're really not there. So you know what it all comes down to? Donald Trump is not legitimate. Donald Trump, this was erratic behavior. You know what? You're exactly right, Kat, that the American people knew exactly what they were voting for, and they think Washington needs it.
Matt brought up a very good point, guys. Control room. Can you go to that soundbite? I thought we weren't going to use it, but listen to the soundbite of exactly what Matt was talking about, if you have it. Go.
Now that he has been let go, why the sudden and selective outrage from your side of the aisle?
For the President of the United States to fire somebody with his own self-admission that he didn't like, he was tired of the Russia-Trump probe, is distressing. It's distressing.
I believe she's distressed. She looks very distressed.
Congresswoman?
Yes. And that's the point Matt was making, Kat, is that, look, they were outraged with Comey after the election. Now they say, hey, why'd you fire him?
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. There's absolutely some of that. And they weren't concerned about Hillary Clinton. Now they're concerned about Trump. Either you care about national security or you don't. We need to get to a point where we care about issues. And with Russia particularly, remember when Mitt Romney said that Russia was our single greatest threat? They were laughing. There was T-shirts mocking him with that on it. And now they've decided, oh, yeah, no, but it is. So it's become only political. And people are tired of that, or else we'd have a different president than we do now.
And maybe that's another message to your Democrat friends out there. Hey, less hypocrisy.
A couple of them. Yeah, no, I mean, you know, Eric, I've been consistent on this issue for a very long time now. You've got to get a message. And this was the failure of the 2016 election, also with a terribly flawed candidate, Mrs. Clinton. But that messaging absence, this is what they are paying a price for. And it's a huge price tag if indeed they are troubled by what they're seeing coming out of this White House. And more Trump hate is not going to fix that.
Dom, quick thought.
Quick thought is they can't penetrate the base of Trump. No matter what he does, people that call me, they're entertained even by this. When he fired Comey, they told me that exactly.
All right, we're going to leave it right there.
First, a breakthrough missile test by North Korea, and now clues that link North Korea that they may be behind the massive ransomware cyber attack that's been sweeping the globe, with security experts now reportedly finding evidence that points to a hacking group connected to the rogue state. Okay, well, there's that. Okay, just go. Okay.
It wasn't the Russians?
Yeah.
For once. No, look, this is a massive issue. North Korea, they've been known to do this before. They've been successful doing it before. No question that they want to do it. Yeah. That's why we need to, honestly, I think this is one of our biggest vulnerabilities. Not that they're going to shoot an intercontinental ballistic missile with a warhead on it at us, that they'll be able to take down some of our systems. They played around with some hospital systems, but what if they get into the Department of Defense or they get into the Treasury Department, something like that? That's where the real risk is.
Well, they took a Johnny Depp film down. Now we're talking big-time problems.
You know, it's true. So they're talking about what they did with Sony a couple years ago, what they're doing. Yeah, what they're doing with Pirates. And it starts there, but Eric's right, Matt. I mean, the long-term consequences of this could be tremendous and could be worse than these nuclear arms threats.
So, but it actually play into each other, because if you think about it, They have to have the missile launch capability, and they have to have the nuclear capability, right, to reach America. And people are telling me within the Trump administration they're going to have that ability, which is just frightening.
Scary.
So think about this next step. Why isn't it happening quicker? My guess is we have some pretty smart cyber experts ourselves, and we're messing around with their software and everything else. That's why a lot of those missiles are ending up in the sea. And the fact is this, there's a whole cyber war going on. So, Eric, I think you got it exactly right.
Yeah. Kat, I mean, obviously, these are enormous concerns. These are things that were talked about a little bit on the campaign trail, but not a ton. To Matt's point, do you feel like the White House is completely on board with this, aware of it, and understands the gravity of how huge this could be?
It's part of the reason why I did not like the way that Donald Trump seemed to sort of minimize the possibility of Russians hacking the election, saying, oh, well, if he did that, he shouldn't have done it. It's a lot more serious than that. Whether it's North Korea, whether it's Russia, another country having the ability to hack into our systems, even, potentially change votes, or like you said, even in a when it comes to military and, DOJ systems, that's a very, very serious thing. And that is the way people are fighting now. We need to make sure that we're secure. We need to make sure we don't play politics with this issue in terms of who's done what or who said what, and all unite around this, because otherwise I don't even want to think about it.
And the fact, remember, if that hacking occurred with the Russians, which I don't believe that had any impact on the elections, Obama did not keep us safe. He actually didn't protect us, and Donald Trump has a chance to actually take steps to keep us safe.
And that's an important distinction right there, Matt. Not that they attempted to hack. Of course, they've attempted to hack. The Chinese want to hack us. Virtually every country in the world wants to hack us, and everyone else. And we're hacking back at them.
Right.
But did it actually change any votes? And I don't think.
I don't really think. Maybe it was minor, but I really don't. I think it was the lack of the message and the basket of deplorables. I think that really angered a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it changed it or not, the point is they attempted it. And if they can attempt it and they can find success there, then we're all vulnerable. So the threat of conflict with North Korea is looming. But in a recent survey published by the New York Times, only 36% of U.S. adults could correctly identify North Korea when presented with a world map. Now, Dom, I am going to repress the attempt to make a joke about the former Teen USA, but what about the maps? I mean, it's quite,
South Carolina, Miss South Carolina. I just played it the other day. It is funny. I think you ought to play it right now.
And she's a really sweet girl, Katie Upton. But anyway, yeah, this is a real problem because
such as right?
Yeah. Because they don't have maps, obviously, Eric. But no, it's a real problem. Most people don't know where North Korea is. And so when we talk about the growing threat there, both on the nuclear front and the cyber front, they really don't know what we're talking about.
Well, I think one of the reasons is, and I think, again, Trump is a great president at this point in time. He's unpredictable. He's paying attention to it. Previous presidents just said, what are you going to do? And it is difficult. They're crazy. They have nuclear weapons. They have famine and everything else. Let's just not talk about them, and they'll go away. So the American people are not paying attention to them.
I'm going to cut these people some slack, though. All of us know where it is because we have to read about this sort of stuff for our jobs. But if you had a job where you didn't have to read about it, you might not want to get home from work. You come home, look at maps in North Korea. You might not. You got to cut them some slack and not shame them. But it's very interesting, of course, that the study also showed that the people who did know where it was on a map were more interested in diplomatic solutions because they might be more likely to understand the proximity to South Korea and China and then sharing that waterway with Japan and what that might do to our relationships with these countries. But I'm not going to, sometimes you come home from work, you just want to watch The Bachelor. You don't want to read up about foreign affairs. And you know what? America, if that's you, then I will not shame you.
If you can't find North Korea on a map, you have no business weighing in on what we should do with North Korea. Period. Period.
But it's so crazy because I think the group, Eric, that had the most ability to identify it were the older people, maybe because they reflect on the Korean War, whatever, but they actually could find it.
Maybe they had a better education back then.
That might be it.
That could be it.
Are maps even in schools now? I doubt it.
Oh, man, you're the educator.
They're kind of culturally rough on people. You really have to show them boundaries in a map and borders. It's very, controversial.
It's all very controversial. So are Republicans planning to go too soft on illegal immigration, while a new bill coming together in Congress is already landing with a thug among many hardliners? More after this.
To an earlier conversation we were having about leaks, the New York Times is now reporting that President Trump asked James Comey to shut down the federal investigation into Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor, during an Oval Office meeting in February. That's according to a memo that Mr. Comey wrote shortly after the meetings. per the Times. But we have a response now from our John Roberts sent this to us. I'll read it very quickly. On background, while the president has repeatedly expressed his view that General Flynn is a decent man who served and protected our country, the president has never asked Mr. Comey or anyone else to end any investigation, including any investigation involving General Flynn. The president has the utmost respect for our law enforcement agencies and all investigations. This is not a truthful or accurate portrayal of the conversation between the president and Mr. Comey. Now, Ebony, this is breaking news. As we went to break, we heard about it. So the Times reporting one thing, the president pushing back on that report.
Absolutely.
Fake news, I would call it.
Well, yeah, and McCabe also saying when he testified just last week that indeed, consistent with what the White House is saying, that indeed was open. And we talked about that last week on the show, that certainly we don't know what legal consequences are going to happen around General Flynn. And I say that respectfully, but that is an ongoing investigation. It should be ongoing. We don't know ultimately where those facts are going to lead us. And if they lead to a breach of law, then those consequences have to follow, and they include criminal prosecution.
Yeah, I can't listen, Mayor, I wasn't there, so with no way of knowing, but good Lord, the president asking an FBI director to go easy on one of his campaign advisors, that seems highly unlikely.
Right, yeah, I don't know. I don't trust the New York Times. I don't trust Trump. I am always skeptical of everyone. Some people say that makes me a pessimist. I say that makes me fair and balanced. But you know what? The investigation is continuing, and that's the most important thing that really matters. He still is being investigated. So there you go.
Schlapp, what about the New York Times? I mean, they have to stand on the reporting and their sources.
Yeah, they do. And look, we've seen this with the Post, where they're saying the #2 man at the Department of Justice threatened to resign, only they can't name anybody he threatened to resign to. And that very person, the Deputy Attorney General, has said he didn't offer to resign. So there's all kinds of interesting reporting. On this one, I just love Jim Comey. He goes and has an intimate dinner with the president, and the president brings it up in an interview. And what does Jim Comey do? It's why he isn't going to be the FBI director anymore, because he's a political animal. He had to immediately start leaking about his end of the story. And, you know, we just want something better than that in our FBI director. We don't want somebody who's trying to weasel his way into every story. And this is what this sounds like again. He always wants to be the Elliot Ness. And really, he's the dirty leaker.
Now, what do you think about this?
What I like it's buttoned up. The president issued a statement. He was very clear. He was very precise with this versus some of the stuff that's off the cuff. This is not off-the-cuff stuff that you can deal with. He's sticking to what is factual here. And as long as he does that, I think in the grand scheme of things, as this plays out, he's well served.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of unanswered questions around several things the president has done. But on this one, Eric, I cannot see him at this point in the game risking that much politically or otherwise around General Flynn. I just can't see it.
It was fired anyway.
Yeah,
exactly.
And here's a key excerpt from the piece. Quote, Mr. Comey was known among his closest advisors to document conversations that he believed would later be called into question, according to 2 former confidants. This is what I'm talking about.
Yep.
You know, these unnamed sources that keep on drumming up and up again. Is this a way to be reporting the news as important and vital to the national security as this news has been?
It really depends on what it is they're covering. But some of these questions, when you're basically questioning somebody's like whether or not they committed treason, which is what some people are saying with Mike Flynn, these questions are so serious. When you say you level these types of charges against the President of the United States, we need more than just we heard from a guy who talked to a guy. And I think that's one of the reasons why the people across this country are starting to read these articles less. And they're looking at other places to get the facts. It's really the media's own fault. People keep saying fake news. I'm fine with that. But the idea is this. They have a liberal bent. Let's face it. They take one side in the political fight. They take the left side. And the American people know it.
The test is this: on an ordinary day, this would be huge news. My guess is along what Matt said, the base of Trump supporters and back to the average American, they're not going to pay attention to this because they're getting worn out of charge after charge after charge. Something like this, of the president trying to tamp this down, usually would be a big news story. Consideration of the other things, it's not.
And that's the problem. And that's the problem, Dom. At this point, everyone is going to their respective corners, whether that be literal right, left, and no one's having a conversation about national security, about whether or not there was a criminal breach that needs to be prosecuted or anything like that.
You know, the most important thing to me is that this investigation keeps going. What's the issue?
You know, according to this New York Times piece, the president asked the FBI director, James Comey, to shut down the federal investigation into Mr. Trump's former national security advisor. And this is, according to the Comey memo, quote, I hope you can let this go. I mean, I mean, that's
amazing.
That is
this is
CYA.
Yeah, by the way, this is a guy who a week ago is wondering why he just got fired from the FBI directorship.
Yeah, that's and again with all the anonymous sources, you don't know where it came from, who said what.
Right.
But again, of course, he's going to deny it either way. The investigation's still going. It's not stopping.
Right.
And so everybody should be happy with that.
Well, I think
right?
Trump is a guy, and I'm sitting here too saying, what in the world takes so long to come to any kind of conclusion on any of this stuff? The Russian conclusion in the election, et cetera. And I think Trump, maybe in a sense of urgency, might be asking about where's the investigation? When are we going to have some facts here, some conclusion on any of these things?
And respectfully to that, I can get that frustration from the outside looking in, but that's just how the FBI is. They're slow. They're
I might want
moving
to
process.
at this point.
Yeah,
the president has to let them do their job.
They have to do their job.
You know, Matt, I want to stay with this a little bit. We're not going to go to break just yet. Well, let's continue to talk about this. You know, one of the things.
What else is Jim Comey telling us now?
So Jim Comey is removed, and that leaves Rod Rosenstein, the deputy director, to oversee the operations at the FBI. I wonder where he is on this. I wonder if he has some input on as to whether or not Comey should be even doing this.
Yeah, so Rosenstein's number 2 at DOJ, right? And you have this other guy, McCabe, who's at FBI. And so McCabe's in this terrible position now where he's running the FBI. But really, I think a lot of people feel like he's also a lightning rod because he took a pass on the investigations of Hillary Clinton. And I think this is the big problem for the country, is that we do have an FBI. It's a little compromised because people have lost confidence. Comey lurched left, he lurched right, he looked political during the campaign. The people around him were obviously giving that advice. Now he has cover as you-know-what memo so that if something goes down, he can look like the good guy in the end. He's now going to prosecute Donald Trump in the press, just like he's done Mike Flynn, just like he's done other people who have crossed them. This sounds like the old days of J. Edgar Hoover. It's not what we need as a country, and let's go get somebody good to run the FBI.
Let me bring our attorney in this a little bit. You know, this level of accusation, I would assume, would hit the check the box for obstruction of justice if true.
Certainly. From Trump's, if the allegation is true from Donald J. Trump, that would be in the highest form. And see, again, this is that type of allegation, this type of cloud that will be hovering until this is resolved definitively around whether or not he did this or he didn't. And it's the kind of thing that if you're an anti-Trump person, you love this. This is great. This is, you know, more fuel for that fire of he's not to be trusted. He doesn't understand this constitutionality war that we're all at. It's more of that. But if it's not true, Eric, then it's more false alarm. It's more false alarm and more undermining of where we really should be talking about. Because I'm very concerned about what General Flynn did, and I want to know factually what he did. I'm unconcerned with the politics around this at this point.
Maybe there was something in the middle. Maybe Trump just said, you know, do you like me or what? How do you feel? Who knows? But again, same thing, the exact same thing as you, Ebony. I'm concerned about what happened with Flynn, but he is gone. All right, and they are still investigating, and nobody wants to bring that up and be like, oh, well, that's good. The world's actually not falling down right now. Things are actually still moving forward.
And Dominic, one of the things, you know, there are two separate issues here. What did Flynn do, and was it illegal or improper or unethical?
And what were the effects?
And what happened afterwards? In other words, what was the investigation? Did anyone try and inhibit the investigation or not? And a lot of times, those are the things that are more damaging than the actual occurrence of what happened.
It's back to the obstruction. And Trump likes Flynn, it's obvious, and he said he's liked him. That's why I like this statement. He said, I still like the guy, but there's nothing that I would have done here. There's nothing that happened here. To Ebony's point, though, I don't know how we are ever going to get to the bottom of who's telling the truth.
Allow me to break it in, you guys, very quickly. John Roberts, he joins us now with more from the White House. John, very latest, some pretty, I don't know, I would call them very, very high-level discussions going on after this piece by the Times.
Yeah, and they've known about it for a while, too, because they had a statement ready to go, which we'll read to you here. The White House response to all of these allegations, quote, while the president has repeatedly expressed his view that General Flynn is a decent man who served and protected our country, the president has never asked Mr. Comey or anyone else to end any investigation, including any investigation involving General Flynn. The president has the utmost respect for our law enforcement agencies and all investigations. This is not a truthful or accurate portrayal of the conversation between the president and Mr. Comey. What we have not gotten from the White House yet is their side of the story. Well, what did the president say to the director of the FBI. The New York Times says that this was an Oval Office meeting back in February. There are a number of people who were meeting with the president, including the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. At the end of that meeting, the New York Times reporting on this Comey memo, the president then said something to the effect that Flynn had done nothing wrong, that the FBI should move on. I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go. The White House specifically pushing back against that language, and I expect that they're going to push back against this hard because it would be highly inappropriate, at the very least, for the president to say to the FBI director, I hope you can let this go and move on. At the worst, it could be obstruction of justice, and we all know where that could lead. So the White House is behind closed doors right now. The communications staff deep in a meeting. It's in the Roosevelt Room, so I think it's probably with some other high-level officials at the White House trying to figure out a way to get past this latest one, which occurs just as the White House is in the middle of this other maelstrom over the president's meeting with Lavrov from Russia last week and what he told him during that meeting. You know, somebody said earlier today that this White House, it just never ends. And you know what? There's credence to that.
Hey, John, very quickly. So yesterday, about 5:45, we had this other issue that you just brought up. The leak to the Washington Post regarding the discussion between Lavrov and Trump in the Oval Office from 6 days ago. Today, 5:30, we get this next one. We did this kind of on the fly, and I got to ask you, what is this memo? I know the New York Times is reporting on this memo, but this Comey memo, where was it? What was it? Obviously he wrote it, but who was he sending it to, and how did the Times get it?
I couldn't tell you how the Times got it. We are searching around trying to get it ourselves, but it would seem that, according to the New York Times, that James Comey kind of had an idea. This is, again, according to people who were close to Comey, who read the New York Times, the contents of the memo, because they do not actually have the document itself, that Comey was concerned about what the president was up to and wrote himself detailed notes after every time they met. Now, don't forget, the president last week sent a warning shot across Comey's bow to say, before you start leaking anything, you better concern yourself with whether or not there are any, quote, tapes of our meetings. We're talking about a White House Oval Office meeting here, and we all remember that one president famously taped all of his private conversations. The White House has refused to say whether there's any kind of recording system in the Oval Office. Everyone thought that the president was referring to his dinner with Comey and his discussions with Comey about not being a target of the investigation on the telephone. But maybe what the president was referring to was this. No, Eric.
All right, John Roberts, thank you very much. At the White House, please let us know, break in again, if you have any more breaking news on that. Matt, it strikes me that this happened a while ago. James Comey had the meeting with President Trump. Maybe the rest of the room was excused except for the two of them. He wrote down notes, took these notes, and decided to hold on to those. And then, just days after he's been fired, decides to write a memo, kind of a scathing memo that could put Trump in some hot water, if true.
So I wrote an article about this week. I was the person in the Bush administration, one of the people James Comey had to come meet with so we could figure out his political point of view. By the way, let's say he's ambidextrous when it comes to these questions. He's liberal, he's conservative, he's whatever he needs to be. What you realize about Jim Comey, he's really about preserving his own reputation. And what did Donald Trump do? He did what a president is allowed to do in his prerogative. At the pleasure of the president, he let somebody go. And now Jim Comey is going to prosecute the president for having humiliated him with that decision. Why are we reading about this memo and learning about it today? Because Jim Comey is striking back. It's how he plays the game, and it's why he did a terrible job politicizing the FBI.
Ebony, what about that? What about having this information, if it's allegedly true? Let's just say it is true. And I'm not saying that, but if it is true, he has this information and sits on it until, as Matt points out, a couple days after he's fired.
Yeah, I think the political implications, I've been very critical of Comey around how he's politicized this election. And now, yeah, he's moving forward as a political animal, absolutely. But let's take it at face value. I think there are questions here about loyalty. A lot of people in America are concerned about President Trump and this issue of loyalty. So this accusation that, Comey was asked to look the other way when it comes to Flynn, and ultimately, and even the statement that we just got from the White House right now, Eric, he ultimately says, I think Flynn is a good guy. I think that there are people that are very concerned about how far does Donald Trump take loyalty and this issue of loyalty. Does he take it far enough to obstruct justice as being accused here? We don't know. But I think that's going to be a question going to be top of mind as we move this conversation
Well, you see
forward.
how much he turns on anybody who disagrees with him or he feels has treated him unfairly. Again, like you said, this accusation in particular is a very, very extreme one. So I don't know if just his personality is evidence that he could have done this. We just simply don't know yet. It's something very serious. And Comey, I mean, it does make sense why he would just do it now, right? You get fired, and then all the stuff comes out. It's like when you're a Scientologist, and then you realize, you know, you don't want. Then it all comes out. It's always after the fact.
So it had nothing to do with the good of the country or concern about the presidency or obstruction of justice. It only had to do with his own ass being fired, I guess.
I'm saying we don't know what it had to do with it at all.
But let me read this line again from the statement from the White House. The White House response, and this is part of it, not the whole thing, but part of it says, the president has never asked Mr. Comey or anyone else to end any investigation, including any investigation involving General Flynn. Dom, I think he very clearly is categorically denying Comey's memo.
Right. And to your point, if this were that serious, and it is, it's obstruction of justice, I think, if I'm playing the legal eagle here, if he uttered those words to Comey, why wouldn't Comey then have to come out with it at that point? Why wait till now? So the credibility gap, I think, is more here with Comey if it's these two, and that's all that we'll have. I don't know that anybody can corroborate anything here.
No, I don't think so at all. I think those that hear this today in this moment and are likely to believe it readily, with absent evidence around it, it's again going back to this concern of how loyal is Donald J. Trump, how much is loyalty a part of, and how far he will go around it.
I don't think anyone's mind is going to change about any of these situations because of this. People who support Trump are going to say, of course, Comey was lying. People who want Trump to be fired are going to say, no, he wasn't. Of course, Trump would do that. Right. There's no actual evidence here, so I don't think it's going to change anybody's mind about anything until we actually have something.
Unless you have these things, these air quotes.
I hope there is a tape.
First of all,
those don't exist anywhere in the world. Garages anymore.
It's not shocking to know that conversations in the Oval Office are monitored by the Secret Service, so these conversations are kept track of. But let me just ask a very simple question. If the president is trying to obstruct justice to the FBI director, he never says anything? If the president is asking inappropriate questions of Jim Comey, he still goes over and has dinner with him and yucks it up with him and has a cocktail? Jim Comey shows a strange pattern of behavior if the president was actually pushing him to do something inappropriate. And the FBI itself is saying the White House pushed back on nothing. They said they did nothing to try to stop these investigations. So the pattern of behavior shows the exact opposite of what Jim Comey said.
You know, Donald Trump ran on draining the swamp. So he goes ahead and he loses confidence in his FBI director, and he fires him. He starts to drain the swamp. And look what happens. At that moment, Comey says, oh, by the way, I had a conversation with him a long time ago. He broke the law. He obstructed justice. I didn't tell you before, but guess what? I'm kind of feeling it now.
And big picture, it looks like piling on. We got the Washington Post. We have the New York Times. It's endless. And these things are not provable on either side. So we're back to the corners again. People in their uniforms tonight, are they with Trump or are they with these elements?
Let's talk about this issue of provability. That's not a word, but, you know, the ability to prove it.
Right.
I really do hope there are tapes. To your point, Matt, you know, if I call up J. Crew to return a sweater, that call is going to be taped because that's what we do. We have those receipts, so to speak, to talk about it.
Okay, let's say there aren't. It's his word against his word.
And nobody
has any credibility. To be candid with you, Eric, Jim Comey has major credibility problems, absolutely, before a huge part of this country.
I'll tell you what the biggest credibility problem he has is the timing on when he decided to write this memo about what he felt was awful.
Make it public.
And
yeah, but people who want to see Trump impeached aren't going to care about that.
Not at all.
They'll believe anything.
But this is how
unless there is some sort of tape or whatever you want to call a recording device, it's his word against his word.
Absolutely.
This is how J. Edgar Hoover. This is how Hoover played the game. He had stuff on people.
But Comey is a smart man. There's no way he doesn't realize, in the absence of tapes, it's his word against Donald Trump's word, and it's going nowhere. So what is the point of this?
Because for him, it's about his honor. And he believes that he is the great man that stands up for the Constitution, and what he really is the little man who's acting like a politician. We want more in our FBI director than this, which is why every Democrat asked for him to be fired. And I agree with Nancy Pelosi. He should be fired.
Comey could have made that I'm standing up for the Constitution argument maybe a year and a half ago, Matt. I think there's very few people, left, right, or center, honestly, if you take the politics off, that believe anything about Jim Comey, anything other than self-serving.
Wouldn't you like to be the new FBI director? Whoever that ends up
I would rather do anything for work than be the new FBI director, because everyone's going to be expecting you to fail.
then maybe they'll just do a good job. We won't read that much about them, and they'll just get about their work. That'd be nice.
People will be looking for them to be biased in favor of Trump.
I'm very sorry that Trey Gowdy decided that he does not want that job. I think
people
he would have been a phenomenal prosecutor.
But because he's a Republican background, I believe that that's true. But I also think because he's a Republican background, no matter what, people would not.